Hello guys, welcome back to narsicloud.com. In our last video, we talked about how to create a user in IAM and how does the user can access AWS resources using their password by logging into the console, right? That's one way of accessing the resources. And there is another way, we talked about that as well, that they can access the resources by using their access key ID and secret, right? They both are tied to the user, right? So if you look at this diagram, we have this user and resources, right? So a user can have the password. They can use the password logging into the console and access the resources depending on the what type of permissions they have, right? Last video, the permissions that we gave, they are for S3, so they were able to see S3 and do something with it depending on type of permissions, right? So that user performed all of that using their password. So AWS authenticated that user with their password. So there is another way that a user can access these resources by using their access key ID and secret, right? So today I will demo a scenario where user can how can a user access these resources using their key and secret, right? So basically, like I mentioned, it all comes down to credentials. So let's take one mission, right? Is one mission and some app is running here. Okay. So this app wants to access the resources. So when I say programmatically, it is some piece of software, right? Piece of software is running in some machine, and that software wants to access the resources, which is what programmatic access, right? We write the code and the code will access the resources, but there is no concept of password there. And how do we get that credentials concept into the picture, right? How does this machine know anything about user credentials? And even this code doesn't know anything about user concept here. In the console scenario, it is pretty straightforward. We are logging into the web application, user is authenticated and identity is pretty clear there. But here it is some random piece of software. So the next step is, so basically we need to find a way to associate the access key ID and secret to this context, which is app running in this mission, right? Let's demo that. So first of all, before we do that, we need to have access key ID and secret. How do we generate them for this user, right? In our last video, we just created that user and we enabled console password. Okay, so that gave the ability to be able to log into the console. Since we didn't generate the access key ID and secret, let's go ahead and generate that. Then let's get back to the main business, right? Okay, so let's go to IAM. We have users, and yesterday we created this demo user, right? Let's go there, and if you look at security credentials, see, we enabled console password, but we did not generate anything under access keys. So create access key, so it will create access key ID and secret access key. Okay, let's download that. Let's keep that over there. Later we will configure those credentials, which is what I was mentioning about attaching that, bringing those credentials into the context. Okay, so here we need to associate these credentials somehow into this mission. Let's assume this mission is what we're demoing from, right? Let's assume this is my mission, which I'm recording this video, right? From my mission, I want to access these resources. What are those resources? Here. So these are the resources, right? These are a lot of services. So I need to access those services from my mission. Okay, using the access key ID and secret. So now question comes down to how do we configure those credentials, and how do we configure those to my mission, right? Which is this mission. Okay. So for that, let's open up the terminal. So this is a Mac, so it might be a little different in other operating systems like Windows and Linux, but the process is pretty much similar to all the OS. Okay. So before we do anything, to be able to access resources programmatically or from command line. So now we are accessing these resources from command line, right? Programmatically means you write a piece of code, and in that code somehow gets the credentials and access the resources. Okay. Since we don't have any piece of software here in this mission, we are accessing from the terminal. So let's get back here. So this piece of software, let's assume we don't have that. Now I am accessing from the terminal. Okay. In this demo, I'm going to show you how does a terminal can access the resources. Okay. Let's get back to the terminal. Right. Okay. The process that we configure the credentials, we call that as configuring the credentials. Okay, AWS configure. So to configure the credentials, we need to install AWS CLI. So what is AWS CLI? It is provided by Amazon Web Services, which will allow you to access the resources or to communicate with AWS from the command line. It is a tool. Okay. How do we install that? In Mac, you can use brew install AWS CLI. Okay. So that's how you can install. It's already installed on this machine. To save some time, I installed that, but that's all I did. Okay. The process is different in other OSs. So you can search for install AWS CLI. There are steps mentioned step by step in all the OSs. So you can follow this if your OS is different from Mac. Okay. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I can, if you want, I can make a video on that as well later. But the process is pretty straightforward there. Okay, it's all about installing. So once we install AWS CLI, we have the tool with us right now. Okay. So once you install that, you will get the this AWS exported, and you can, that's a script basically that you can use that. Okay. So once you click AWS, it will give you some commands. You can use that to see what you could do with that with AWS CLI. For example, AWS S3, if I click help, it will give you all the documentation description about S3, what kind of operations that you can do on S3. Okay, this is quick notes about AWS CLI. But our goal today is to use CLI and access the resources, right? So the next step is configuring the credentials. Okay. Since we created the credentials for the user, let's minimize that. Credentials, let's configure them. So let's open that. Let's open them here. Let's keep it open and let's run configure command. Okay. Let's configure, and here let's copy this access key ID and secret. Or before that, okay, let's get back. Before that, I would like to demo how does it look like without configuring that. Okay, so if you look at this diagram here, you have terminal, and this machine doesn't know anything about the credentials, right? So now we have this AWS CLI already installed, so we have the tool. We can communicate with the resources directly now, right? Let's see what happens when we don't have the credentials there. Without credentials, if you try to contact resources, let's see what happens. Okay, what the command I'm trying here is I'm trying to list the buckets from S3. Okay, so this is the syntax, and what bucket do we have here? For this user, we have demo user bucket, right? So I can do that. So what this command does is it's going to list out the bucket. Okay, if I do that, see what is saying? Unable to locate credentials. You can configure credentials by running AWS configure. Okay, so what it's saying is this machine doesn't have any credentials located. Okay, so which is what needed to contact resources. So that's the step that we're doing right now, is configuring the credentials. Okay, now let's configure that, and let's get back to credentials. Let's copy this access key ID and secret. And region, default region name US East 1. Depending on your location, you can figure out what region you belong to. And default output JSON. That's it. So what really happened right now, we associated credentials to that machine. So that means those credentials must have been saved somewhere on this machine, right? So that would be saved under cd. If you go to .aws folder, that's where it would have been saved. See, I just saved that. So when you do that configuration, it will create credentials file and config. Okay, so in the credentials file, you will have those access key ID and secret access key. Okay, and this represents default. So what does that mean? This is the profile. So this is the default profile. So you can specify the same credentials and you can give whatever the profile name you want here. Okay, and when you do that, if you go to config file, here this is the profile. Okay, so you can define multiple profiles over there with the different names, and you can use one of those profiles. Right now by default it uses the default profile. Okay, so now credentials are associated. Now let's access the S3. Let's run the same command before which we ran to list the bucket, right? Let's see what happens. See, it's able to do that. So let's upload some file into this bucket and let's list out that. Okay, so here let's assume that, okay, let's upload those keys. Okay, it's been uploaded. Now if we do ls, it should show that file. See, it got that file. So this client is communicating to the resources, to S3 resource. Why is able to do that? Because we have permission for that user. If you go to user here, look for the permissions. We gave Amazon S3 full access permissions here. Let's take this out for a second. Let's detach that. Okay, now let's access that. Let's try to access that bucket and see what happens. See, it's access denied. See how easy it is to change permissions and to be able to access resources using CLI, using the access key ID and secret. So it all comes down to credentials, right? Now it's making sense, right? What I said before, it all comes down to credentials. It could be password, it could be access key ID and secret. So if you have access key ID and secret, you can access resources from anywhere else. It could be from CLI, it could be from your software piece of code running. What does that code do to access? It will use those access key ID and secret, and it will do this step, AWS configure. So whatever mission, wherever it is running, the piece of code is running, it will use those access key ID secret and it will configure. So here we manually run configure, right? How does this work for when in the context of code? So there AWS provided SDKs, software development kits. They have different SDKs depending on the language that you use. So we use AWS SDK and we call configure one of those functions, and then that does all these steps and it takes care of rest of this authentication process. Okay, so that's all guys for today. So if you look at this preview, what really happened, just to summarize, we take an example of this mission, which is empty mission. It doesn't have any software, it has the terminal, and we showed how does this terminal can access the resources. To access the resources, we need to associate user to this, and we have this user we worked on yesterday. With the password, he was able to access the resources, and we generated access key ID and secret, and we associated them to this mission by using the step of configuration, AWS configure, and that created the credentials in this mission. And when we run AWS command, which we were able to do that because we installed AWS CLI, right? And using CLI, we ran that command. We listed the bucket, and it was able to communicate to the S3 here, and we got the content back. And also we detached the policy, and we ran the same command, and we got permission denied. So this is all about accessing the resources. Irrespective of the scenario, wherever you go in AWS, this is what exactly happens. When somebody is talking about, okay, I don't have access to, I don't have permission to access these resources, or if somebody says I'm not able to access these resources, it all comes down to credentials. Okay, if you remember that one point, you can do anything. So that's all guys for today. If you like this video, please click on like button and please do subscribe, and we will meet in our next video. We'll go furthermore on different concepts under IAM. Okay, see you guys, bye.